What is the difference between your job and Dr. Jayashankar's job?
Well, Dr. Shankar is the political head.
Okay.
So the larger, broader policy decisions, the vision of the Prime Minister and the External Affairs Minister is implemented by the civil service. And you head the civil service. So you're the head implementer of the policies that are decided by the Prime Minister, the External Affairs Minister, or the Cabinet, and you implement. A close call was also when I was actually booked on a flight. This was in Vietnam and Hanoi. And that flight was on a particular day. And just before that flight, my ambassador got a message saying that his son had got admission in university. So they decided to take their son and see him off in Bangkok, which is next door. So they said, look, I mean, there are few people in the embassy. So why don't you stay for one more day? By the time we will come back. So the last moment I postponed my ticket and that flight crashed and everybody on that flight died. So some of these are also fate.
Today's guest has previously served as the Foreign Secretary. He's currently the Chief Coordinator for India's presidency for the G20. If you don't know what these terms mean, don't worry. Every single conversation of TRS is created for school-going listeners as well. So we're going to cover the basics and we're going to go to the advanced level of geopolitics with this man. It's people like him whose geopolitical opinion should be heard more by the Indian youth. Everyone's into geopolitics today, but please listen to the experts, listen to their opinion, and ideally do it on podcasts just like this. This is Harshvardhan Shringla sir on TRS. Welcome to the HV Shringla show.
I thought it was a Ranveer show, but I'm delighted if you start calling it the HV Shringla show. I'd be delighted. Yeah.
We are going to learn so much from you today, sir. But I'll begin with a simple how are you?
Great. Couldn't be better. Wonderful to be in Bombay. Wonderful to be in this lovely studio.
So I have to begin by asking you a simple question when I'm talking to people like yourself who are working in the kind of positions that you're working in, which is that if you were in America or Europe and a 6-year-old came up to you and said, "Sir, what do you do for a living?" How would you explain it?
Good question. Well, what I do for a living is talk on behalf of the government to other governments.
Okay.
The world is divided between different countries. Countries need to speak to each other. The way they speak to each other is that they appoint representatives who talk to each other. And I'm a representative, or at least I was a representative. And so it's a matter of communicating between governments and between government entities. So that's how I'd put it in very simple terms. And I think a lot of what we do is really communicating. You need to communicate so there are no misunderstandings. It doesn't lead to conflict. It doesn't lead to wars. I'm looking at the real extreme side of things. But you also need to communicate to cooperate. You need to communicate to make sure that your exchanges, which is normal, which is in trade and people-to-people contacts, all that goes smoothly. So communication between governments is an important part of interstate relations. And that's been there from historic times. You've always had, Chanakya who wrote, Kautilya who wrote the Arthashastra. It is a treatise written, before the advent of the Christian era. So in a certain sense, diplomacy and the art of communicating between states, man has always found the need to do it once he formed entities, like a state or a geographical entity, and you need to speak to the next entity. So that communication has always existed, and today it's become a little more sophisticated because states have, I think, in many senses, mastered that profession over a period of time, and that's what diplomacy is all about.
Okay, that's what a foreign secretary does, pretty much.
You really are the head of the pack that engages in this communication with different countries.
Okay.
So it is the articulation of your country's, views, policies, expression that you actually orchestrate as the head of that team. So that team might be the part of government that communicates with other governments. That's what you head.
Okay.
And that you do it also through field offices, which are your embassies and your consulates and your high commissions. And they, further break down what you have to say. You're right. That's what a foreign secretary does. He oversees that essential communication between your country and other countries.
Okay. So you're the leader of the unit that speaks to other governments on behalf of our government, whether it comes to conflict, whether it comes to pacts, whether it comes to future strategy or future relations between the nations.
Absolutely. Just
Fun
about
job.
anything. Yeah, it's fun. You can't complain.
Really?
It could sometimes, most of the time it is fun. It could get serious from time to time. But
Okay.
then, of course, that's what you're there for.
When is it not fun, sir?
Well, honestly, if you like your job, it's always fun.
Okay.
I mean, I've always felt that you must always do what you really like. You must enjoy what you do so that it gets the best of you.
Okay.
If you don't enjoy what you're doing, then you shouldn't be there. And I've always found the line that I've been, line of diplomacy, line of representing governments to be an enjoyable exercise.
Okay.
And of course, as I said, I mean, it is something that if you enjoy doing, even if it is sometimes onerous, sometimes it's many things that you work on are time bound. You also work on issues like which are operational in nature. You're working on a project, for example, between countries.
Can you give an example of that?
For example, you are overseeing, say, the construction of railway lines between your country and, say, or neighboring countries, say Nepal or Bangladesh or, Bhutan, or you're constructing roads that connect your two countries, or you're constructing dams. Surprisingly, the Ministry of External Affairs oversees all of these projects in foreign countries. And you're not directly, there are technical and there are experts who do it, but the oversight is yours. I mean, not always, but if you are in that position, you do it.
What is the difference between your job and Dr. Jaishankar's job?
Well, Dr. Jaishankar is the political head.
Okay.
So policy decisions, the larger, broader policy decisions, the vision of the Prime Minister and the External Affairs Minister is implemented by the civil service. And you head the civil service. So you're the head implementer of the policies that are decided by the Prime Minister, the External Affairs Minister, or the Cabinet, and you implement it. So
Okay.
elected representatives that form the political leadership are the ones who provide the broader vision, the guidance, and the policy guidance. Implementation of that guidance is done by the civil service. Of course, as the Foreign Secretary, you're also an advisor to the Prime Minister and the External Affairs Minister. Not that the External Affairs Minister needs much guidance. He was my predecessor, twice removed, and you don't have a more experienced person. And of course, the Prime Minister himself is so exposed to international relations that he, in many senses, is a master of what he surveys. And of course, I'm currently handling the G20 coordination, which I enjoy doing because
Okay.
it gives me a different facet of work, somewhat different from what you normally do.
Okay.
And a lot of my work involves interacting with the states, with stakeholders, partners, organizing, something which is as extensive as the G20 on the ground.
What is the G20 Summit?
So, what is the G20 or what is the summit?
Both.
Well, the G20 is a group of 20 nations, actually 19 nations and one organization, that's the European Union. And the genesis or the origin of the G20 is in what was earlier the G7 and the G8. You had the G7, which exists today, the developed countries, and they took a number of decisions that were financial and economic in nature. And a lot of the global decision making also was at one stage carried out by the G7. But when you had the financial crisis of 2008, they understood that you really need the emerging economies. You need Russia, you need China, you need India, you need Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Brazil. So these countries are critical to global decision making when it comes to dealing with financial and socio-economic matters. And so you had the G20, which was formed. And the G20 is largely dealt with issues that, as I said, financial and economic in nature. But over a period of time, because leaders meet, and I suspect because the normal agencies, intergovernmental agencies that should be doing this today lacks the representation, lacks the democratic mandate to be able to fulfill their obligations. The United Nations, for example, is today largely deadlocked on geopolitical issues. The institutions like the IMF and the World Bank today may not have the capacity or the mandate to live up to the expectations of the developing world. Countries that are indebted, countries that need greater financing, need greater support, they're not up to the task. So you perforce go to groupings, smaller groupings, not like the UN, but smaller groupings like the G20, to provide a level of global governance, which is not just financial and economic in nature, but also in some senses, even humanitarian or anything that meets the requirements of the job. That means the G20's approach should be based on helping other countries. And our foreign policy, if you look at our foreign policy based on the spirit of Vasudev Kutumbakam, is really working for the larger common good, the global common good.
Vasudev Kutumbakam is altruistic thought, like in terms of every being should benefit, every person should benefit, right?
So, yes.
Go on.
G20 under our presidency has, Vasudeva Kutumbakam is, the English version is looked at as one earth, one family, one future.
Right.
So it is, in a certain sense, an interpretation of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which really means working for the global, larger common good. The world is one family. And if you have to progress and you have to, humanity has to move forward, you have to move forward together. So you look at the future in a positive, cooperative way.
We're going to be talking about our neighbors because there's actually a lot of Pakistani viewers of the show as well. I don't know why they watch an Indian geopolitics podcast, but from your eyes, because you're technically not just a geopolitical observer, but it's your profession. Like, you know aspects of geopolitics that the common man cannot possibly know.
Well, we think so, but
I don't know. I think there's access to some heavy levels of big data. But anyway, I'd like to ask you if you guys and the think tank around you guys was able to predict what's going to happen in Pakistan today. I don't know what the equivalent of Pakistani IS is called. I think it's called PAS. There was a civil servant's house that got burnt to the ground and people were stealing food from that person's house. And this is becoming meme material in India. That someone's stealing chicken from the house, someone's stealing dessert. That's the condition of that nation in some parts. Were you guys able to predict that this is going to happen to Pakistan going forward? Like this kind of economic turmoil?
Well, I think the signs were there. In terms of political instability, but also in terms of an economic crisis in the making. I mean, we've been seeing a negotiation with the IMF over a period of time, the last few years, which has been, partly successful, but clearly not fully successful. There's been talk about a bailout also, not just by the IMF, but by countries that are sympathetic to Pakistan. And in a certain sense, I think a combination of factors, combination of the factors I just mentioned, the global factors also, have impacted adversely on Pakistan. It's impacted on our own entire neighborhood. If you see Sri Lanka, if you see many of our other neighbors, also have been facing the brunt of situations which are beyond their control. The globe today is interlinked and interconnected in a manner that you may be thousands of miles away from an epicenter of conflict or disease, but you are still adversely affected equally as people who are there, right there. So I think Pakistan is no different. They've faced the brunt of COVID. They faced the brunt of higher prices of the import of fuel, fertilizers, food. At the same time, I think, management, good sound policies are very important. I think we are very lucky that we've emerged from COVID as a resilient economy. The government has, I think, managed COVID very well. We've administered over 2 billion vaccines to our citizens through the CoWIN digital platform. We have provided very strong financial and food support to 70% of our population. Government, I think, has spent 1.7 lakh crore rupees, about $29 billion through the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. And as a result of that, I think every single citizen who is in need of that support during the COVID period has got that support till the end of 2021. Sound policies make a difference. Sound governance matters. The right decision, the right time makes a lot of difference. I mean, I've been very fortunate to work, with the Prime Minister on many crisis situations. And I think as a country, we really need to be very cognizant of the fact that you are in very, very good hands and safe hands, in a sound pair of hands guiding the system. That extends obviously to the larger leadership and people like External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar. Everybody who's in that decision-making process are people who understand there's a responsibility and take decisions that is in the best interest of the country. This is my personal view.
No, sure. Abroad, we are portrayed as a fascist country. Portrayed. Like, that's the truth. And again, I'm saying that from youth perspective. I'm trying to correct that through the podcast, because this podcast is watched by white people as well, who's sitting in America, sitting in UK.
Again, when I was in the US, I met a record number of senators and congressmen, about 450 of them, for the simple reason that I wanted to reach out to each of them and say, look, this is the reality. And to many of them, I said, go and visit India.
Yeah.
Go and see for yourself. That's the point you raised. You're sitting here and you're being subject to a certain point of view. Which is subjective. I mean, you go and get your own first-hand opinion. Meet our leadership, meet people on the streets, go and see for yourself what's happening. If you think that the development in our country is in some senses discriminative, if you think that there is a certain lack of media freedom, then go and have a look for yourself and see. And I think many of them actually did come down and, their views certainly became more balanced. So perceptions are important, and how you shape those perceptions are very important. And I think some of the, as I said, coverage and some of the reporting would give you give the common man a very wrong sense of view. And I think, it's a constant ongoing struggle to maintain, a sort of a balanced position.
Yeah. Pardon the intrusiveness of this question. I just have extremely intrusive thoughts. And now that you're here, I'm just going to be upfront with you and ask you this. Have you been in rooms where the Dawood Ibrahim situation has been discussed and why Pakistan's not sending him back?
Well, I spent some of my time in the UN Security Council, where this issue was discussed. That he, in many senses, he is a listed individual even in the UN. So listing some of these, I would say, terrorists and those who are cross-border offenders, from that point of view, that means you've committed a terrorist act, but you've gone to another country and you've sought haven there. There are many mechanisms to go after them. One is the UN Security Council, which has the ability to impose sanctions on some of the individuals and countries harboring them. The other is organizations like the Financial Action Task Force. FATF is a very strong instrument that can actually utilize the movement of funds to control, I would say, some of the control those who try to shelter and harbor terrorists.
You mean terrorists also have to earn money? So all the businesses that they're engaging in, somehow the money is flowing in and out?
That's one aspect of it. But states also come under enormous pressure.
As in, you can put pressure on Pakistan?
Exactly.
Okay.
And a number of terrorists have come and, Pakistan has been forced to take people who've been sort of leading very comfortable lives and put them at least ostensibly in prison. And I think you have to go hammer and tongs at these people. I mean, you really have to use every mechanism and instrument at your disposal. I'm talking about not just India, but the international community, in order to ensure that there is no more scope and no more justification for terrorism of any kind. And that is very important. And Dawood Ibrahim comes under that category. He has committed unspeakable acts of terrorism in this very city. And I think, there has to be, some accountability for that.
Is he still alive?
But, honestly speaking, can't answer that question because I don't know.
Okay.
And I think I suspect that those who should know will have that.
Do know. Okay. Why isn't Dawood Ibrahim spoken about as a subject in foreign media? When they're printing that Imran Khan article about how we're ruled by a fascist regime, next to it there should be an article about how Pakistan harbors Dawood Ibrahim style people as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been saying that all through that Pakistan is not only the epicenter of terrorism, but has also supported a terrorist infrastructure and has indulged in cross-border terrorism to our detriment. And Mumbai, with 2611 and a number of incidents, has been at the receiving end. As the financial and commercial capital of the country, you've tried to cripple that economy of the country through such acts. And I think it's very important that we have a firm line. And I think this government has taken a very firm line in dealing with this issue. I mean, it's a no-nonsense approach. Pathankot or any incidents that happened, I think required a certain amount of retribution. And I think that's the only way it works. That is, you do me harm, I can inflict harm on you also. And certainly, I think that message has come out. You have, we had the anniversary of 2611, you had the entire UN Security Council who came down for that to Mumbai and to Delhi. You had the No Money for Terror global conference in which I think the whole focus was ensuring that the financial flows to terrorist organizations are cut. So I think we are in the forefront of this counterterrorism effort.
How are terrorist organizations funded?
They're funded through, sympathizers, sometimes even through entities, and sometimes even through governments.
Sympathizers as in human beings who believe in the
cause or the ideology or,
Okay.
Yeah. And, after all, an organization like ISIS was funded. And there are a whole lot of people who went and joined ISIS also because they felt attracted to that ideology for whatever, reason. So I think those channels of funding, which were actually earlier quite open, through normal bank transactions, and you fund charity organizations, in turn they fund these organizations into sub-organizations. Today, there's a lot more international scrutiny on that sort of funding. This is, not just in our country, but globally also. So you turn to, other sources, Hundi, Hawala, whatever it is. I mean, there are many ways of getting funds across. But so it's a cat and mouse game, and the authorities have to always be on top of the game to ensure that that funding for terrorism is cut. As you know, there was also the question of fake Indian currency notes, FICN, that used to come in, through several borders of ours, and were also used to finance terrorist activities. Besides the issue of trying to derail our economy again through flooding it with fake notes. I think the abolition of some of the currency that demonetization introduced took care of some of that, but also much stricter control regimes that was imposed in Bangladesh and countries like Nepal, I think also helped that these borders were no longer that conducive to that sort of activity. So you've got to always sort of how would you say, take steps to control and to monitor some of this activity. And I think for a country like ours, we are a large country, we have open borders, there's a lot of movement of people. We are a free society. People write what they want, they say what they want, they move around. It's not a controlled state. From that perspective, we are more vulnerable. Democracies, by its very nature, are more vulnerable to terrorists, anti-nationals, saboteurs for their pernicious interests. So I think we have to be, our agencies and our authorities have to be much more vigilant and much more careful. The question of even of funds that come from abroad, those also, I think, have to be very carefully scrutinized to ensure that it's not misutilized. Now, there's a difference between funding which is legitimate and which is above board, and one that in which explanations can't be given. And you've seen even organizations that are supposed to be above board have, to some extent, not been clean on some of these issues of where they're getting them and where is the funding going.
Mm.
And I think it was necessary to scrutinize that very closely.
Okay. Does this casual format of questioning bother you?
No, I'm beginning to quite like it actually,
Why?
because it's a free flowing conversation,
Versus?
and versus something that is structured, where you need to not only sort of get your thoughts together, but you also have a situation where it is you're defined by certain rules. And here it is as free flowing means that you say what you want to, you interrupt me when you want to. It's a conversation between two individuals, so it's more informal and accordingly more enjoyable. And you're not sticking to, it's not agenda 1, agenda 2, etc. We are flowing where the conversation takes us.
Yeah. I think the truth kind of just reveals itself through these conversations, and
I hope there's not too much truth though.
No, I mean, the internet loves the truth. My YouTube channel loves the truth. Truth is fantastic for views. But I also think, again, the Indian youth is super intelligent now, so they can read between the lines. Which is why it's incredible to learn from people like yourself. This format didn't exist 5 years ago, and now we get to learn from people like you who've worked in the places you worked in and done what you've done. Keeping the same thought in mind, I want to ask you about the most difficult phase or the most difficult challenge you faced in your entire career. Because you've had different job profiles over the course of being a civil servant.
I was in Bangladesh, in Dhaka at that time, and when there was a terrorist attack, what is called the Holy Bakery attack, and these young people from privileged backgrounds, tried to emulate the ISIS, in my view. Took an entire cafe hostage and brutally murdered all the occupants of that cafe. And in that was also an Indian girl, a young girl, Tarini Jain. And I was in Delhi at that time, that evening, in which both the External Affairs Minister, then late Minister Sushma Swaraj, and Dr. Jaishankar, who was Foreign Secretary at that time, constantly in touch with me to find out. And ultimately, sadly, we learned that she had been killed. So I immediately rushed back. Dr. Jaishankar said, just take the first flight back. I went back. The first thing I went from the airport to the hospital, where I went and met the parents of this girl. Tarini was her name. And I met the parents of very lovely couple, very, very good friends. But meeting them, along with all the other, parents and relatives of all the others who had died, were all there in our hospital. And it was a very sad moment. And we were taken together to the morgue to identify the bodies. And that was one of the saddest moments, to see parents look at their loved ones who had been killed in that way. I mean, I think that was the most difficult phase of my career. And I can never forget that experience. I mean, this sympathy that I had for the parents and the sense of injustice, life taken away just for no reason, a young life, and many young lives. I mean, she was not the only one. There were some 20, 30 people who were killed that day. So that is why, I mean, I was confronted firsthand with the realities of terrorism on the one hand, and on the other hand, also the extreme, I would say, sadness and despondency that the parents went through. At that moment, that they had to really contend with the fact that their daughter was no more. I mean, it was really very, very difficult. And I think that phase was difficult in that country, because we had to really, when the country itself sort of geared up to fight terrorism at a different level, and I think to their credit succeeded, but we had to also ramp up our security and take steps that would insulate us in any future such thing. But what I'm saying is, as an episode, that was a very difficult personal episode for me.
Has your life ever been in danger because of your job?
Well, I think there were times in which we've had some, close situations. It could be in conflict zones. For example, in Cambodia, when the civil war was raging, we had our archaeological survey of India people who were working on the Angkor Wat. But just on the outskirts of the city, the Khmer Rouge were operating, and it was like a war zone. In the evening at nightfall, these people would be there, and I had to go and inspect the place. And we actually were close to some of the firefights that took place. On another occasion, criminal activity in South Africa was quite serious, and there could have been some incidents that were involved. We could be lucky, the wrong person in the wrong place. But, a close call was also when I was actually booked on a flight. This was in Vietnam and Hanoi. And that flight was on a particular day. And just before that flight, my ambassador got a message saying that his son had got admission in university. So they decided to take their son and see him off in Bangkok, which is next door. So they said, look, there are few people in the embassy, so why don't you stay for one more day? By the time we will come back. So the last moment, I postponed my ticket, and that flight crashed, and everybody on that flight died. So some of these are also fate. Some of these are also product of situations that you are taken in. Look, diplomacy is not entirely safe. We've lost our colleagues. A very close friend of mine, V. Venkat Rao, was killed in the bomb blast in Afghanistan, along with other people. A number of our colleagues died, during the COVID period. You are also confronted with the realities of the place that you're in. But that's part of your occupation, and sometimes that brings you in close proximity with risks. But so be it. You never let it get to you. You just move on. That's it.
Okay. While we've almost reached the end of the episode, sir, there's one last question I have for you, which is a fan's question almost. This has become a very hot topic on the show, and I don't think that there's a better person than you to answer this question. The question is, what is the legend Dr. Jaishankar like to work with? Because I feel that when you work with someone, that's the truest form of character reveal that possibly happens. Probably deeper forms of character reveal happen when you work with someone as compared to even being in a relationship with someone. Like, you really get to see the person's character. So, what is Dr. Jaishankar like?
I think you use the right word. He's a legend.
Okay.
I think he's the sharpest mind in diplomacy. And I've had the good fortune and privilege to work with him, since I was in Bangladesh as High Commissioner. He was Foreign Secretary. In fact, he cut my tenure short in Thailand and said, go to Bangladesh. And he gave me that opportunity. Because for every Foreign Service officer, it's a dream to work in the neighborhood. When you come to foreign policy, you're the, I would say, the most challenging assignments and the most important assignments are your neighborhood, contrary to opinion. And so to have an opportunity to work in a neighbor like Bangladesh was a great one. And he pulled me out for that. And he gave me the opportunity. And, every time I went back, on something, I think his decision-making was instant and absolutely clear. So his clarity, I'm talking about the Bangladesh experience, but I think as the minister, and I was the foreign secretary, you have a direct line and you work very closely with the minister. I was struck by his clarity of thought. His thinking is absolutely clear. His vast experience in diplomacy, his feel for things, and I think some of that he has spoken about also, comes out of experience and instinct. You reach a stage where you have that instinct and a feel for diplomacy, and he has that. As I said, you can't have, watching him converse, watching him deal with difficult and complicated and sensitive situations, watching him negotiate, watching him in a more, meeting larger groups of people, interacting. He's, in many senses, an amazing phenomenon. His wit, his ability, his diction, his erudition, his grasp of foreign policy issues, and at the end of the day, the application. You may be all-knowing, maybe a pundit, you may have the most amount of knowledge in that field that you could offer. but in many cases, the actual application and implementation could be faulty. He has the ability to both think, visualize, and act in a level that surpasses everything. So it's rare to see that in an individual, where you can both have a vision of a certain concept, but at the same time be able to implement it on the ground in an effective manner is, I think, rare.
The one thing I've understood about diplomacy is that the skill sets involved are communication skills, policy, which I count as a skill set. Just the ability to come up with better foreign policies that would benefit your nation in the long term. I would also say just a balanced amount of aggression. I think that is needed. Am I wrong in saying that?
In today's world, in today's context, I think you need to have a certain calibrated aggression. Someone like Dr. Jayashankar is very calm, very, you can never provoke him into any situation. So perhaps aggression is not the right word, but he has the ability to, sharply take up an issue where it is necessary. I think that's absolutely critical, that you are able to convey a point of view more forcefully, convey a point of view in a more persuasive manner. There are different nuances in the way you handle it. He has the ability to, the entire repertoire is there with him. That's what I'm saying, that, that sort of consummate professionalism is nothing short of brilliance.
Okay. When he was the foreign secretary, did he ever tell you about his political ambitions?
Not at all.
Could you have guessed that he'll be the foreign minister in a few years?
Well, I mean, look, he was always someone who had abilities that were beyond the normal. So you didn't think that that was the last that was the last, let's say, responsible position that he would hold. He went into the private sector where he did equally well. When I was in the US, he used to visit the US from time to time because he represented, the international arm of the Tatars, you dealt with him on a different level because he was not in government; he was representing industry. But even then, I mean, his grasp of industry and the concepts that were there that came with it was impeccable. So it's just not just as a diplomat. I think if you are a person with experience, you have the ability to apply the experience in a positive manner, you can contribute in any field. I feel that, we are in the area of diplomacy, but you can apply that experience, you can apply those skill sets in any situation.
Including
management.
Including the position of PM?
No, I mean, what I'm saying is that you can apply it across the board I was talking about the private sector and industry.
Okay.
That, you are not only, I mean, as a diplomat, you're dealing with issues which is basically requires a certain level of balanced, rational thinking, a certain level of coherence, as you said, articulation, and management of issues on the ground. That's what you do in the private sector at senior positions also. So his success as a diplomat translated to success as a corporate leader, and then is translated into greater success as a political leader, as a minister, one who leads our foreign policy. I think he has been an unqualified success, and those of us who worked with him are privileged to have that opportunity. And I've seen him engaging audiences on serious issues, but you also bring in the wit and the humor in these situations that works very well.
Yeah,
all round.
Speaking of works very well, I want to ask you if you have gone and seen the comment section in the podcast that you did with Smita Prakash. There's a lot of love for you.
Okay.
Have you?
So honestly speaking, I have not.
Okay.
I got feedback saying that it seemed to have been reasonably well received. But now that you mention it, I should go back and look at that.
There's a lot of love for you. As in, before every podcast, I have to do my research. And usually, if it's a guest that Smita ma'am has had on the show, I watch that entire episode. So let me tell you that even you have that kind of respect, love, and that kind of a cult following that's beginning to grow on the internet. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart, sir, for being on the show and speaking so openly. I know I was a little too direct with you at some moments in this chat.
Look, in our game, we faced all sorts of situations, and directness. Being direct is the best you can do because it comes to you frontally.
Yeah.
We are used to all sorts of subtle ways of saying things, which sometimes is more challenging than having this wonderful informal, and fun conversation.
Yeah, I'm just repping the youth mindset at this point. It's a very Virat Kohli mindset, which is just let's talk straight to the point.
Mm.
One last sawal for you, sir. What's your book about?
So honestly, it's not my book,
Okay.
but it's a book written on me by a professor in Sikkim University. She has interviewed me, but I think I couldn't spend enough time on this on providing inputs to her as I would have wanted to, because it's very difficult. I mean, very I would say intense phase, as foreign secretary, and much of the book was I think prepared at that time. But she's done a good job of interviewing number of friends, colleagues, associates, also taken a lot of material from published sources. So put together something which I think from her point of view is intended to be more motivational, more like a life's journey that is able to, in some senses guide younger people. I mean, as you say, the young people today are, very aware. They've got a mind of their own. But this book is to say that, look, here are the ups and downs and the highs and lows, and this is what you could do. And one or two of the things that come out, I think, as I read this and I look at it myself, is that whichever post I've gone to and where I've had the opportunity, I've tried to make the difference, irrespective of what it may be good for me, it may be bad for me. I've never looked at that. Every place I've gone to, I've tried to make the difference that place is not our relationship or our interests are one step higher. And that's been my endeavor in every place I go to. I apply myself in a manner that makes a difference. I believe that each individual makes a difference. Each officer and someone in public service should actually make more difference, because you are there to make a difference in the lives of people. Otherwise, you should be in the private sector. You should be making money for yourself. But if you join public service, you should be working for the larger interests.
Yeah.
How can you make the difference? I mean, the Prime Minister says you take a document and you see whether you need all these rules and regulations. If anything you don't need should be taken out. Make it as simple as possible. So, you have 100 people who come to you every morning for passport renewal, something else. The community comes to you. Make it as simple as possible for them. Cut out all the red tape. In Thailand, I had one officer there from 9 to 11 every day. His job was only to talk to people and say, what's your problem? Let me try and resolve it. It's not popular, I must say, because, civil service and bureaucracy, by its very nature, is status quo. You don't want change. And when you introduce change, then there's resistance in the system. In Bangladesh, before I went, Dr. Jaishankar was the foreign secretary at that time. He said, we have a severe problem in the perception that our visa system is not working well. You do whatever it takes to resolve it. And he gave me the fullest support of the ministry. And what we found was that we were issuing 5 lakh visas. Nobody knew what the demand was, because there was a internet system. And within the first 2 or 3 minutes, like a railway ticket in those old days, it was oversubscribed. So it was finished. And you would have these queues of people, about a kilometer long from our High Commission. As you went by them, clearly they resented you because they felt that you were humiliating them, stand for hours on end. That issue we tried to resolve. And I brought in changes and I insisted on those changes, despite, as I said, again, resistance from below. And one of the things I did was that I had a special visa camp. I said, let's see how many people come. Let's have the entire embassy work on the visas. Shut the embassy, work on the visas. For 3 days, I had a camp. Anybody who wanted a visa came. 12,000 people turned up. The queues went, but we issued in the 4 or 5 days, we issued 58,000 visas. By the end of it, we went from 5 lakhs to 15 lakh visas. And that thing was completely resolved. But I did find that among the rank and file, it was not an easy exercise to push it through, because, people don't want necessarily to change. Honestly, there are there are always also interests that mitigate against change. And the system backed me completely. So you have a government that wants a clean setup, a setup that works well. And we are fortunate again to work. You do your job well, you're given full support.
Gotcha.
I mean, you don't do your job well, that's your lookout. But I mean, one thing, as I said, coming back to the book, is that every place I've been, I've tried to make it an endeavor to make the change that is for the better. Whether I've succeeded or not is a different issue. That verdict is a different thing. But from my side, I've tried my best.
Shringla sir, thank you. Great learning from you today. Again, sometimes I have to pinch myself to really believe that I get to talk to someone who served as the Foreign Secretary of India. This is my job. So it's crazy to be able to learn from you and to be able to share all these learnings with the audience. I know that the audience is grateful to you as well. Once again, I point you towards the comment sections. And all I'll say to you at the end of this episode is just look out for the love.
No, thanks a lot. And I must point out one thing which probably didn't come out earlier, is that I belong to a small place in a remote part of the country. I'm from the hills of Darjeeling. And in many senses, even though I've traveled throughout the country and throughout the world, I'm at the end of the day a Darjeeling boy, and I go back to that small place in that part of the country. And it all comes from there. At the end of the day, again, if I am anything, it is because of the support that I've received from my parents, my community, and my larger neighborhood. And then, of course, later the rest of the country, whatever it is. The fact is, you have an obligation to perform by those who've
gotten you till there.
Yeah, and who are, with you. As you say, you talk about the love and affection. I think that is where that motivation is for people to do 100%. Their best.
What I will definitely say is that you're inspiring many more HV Shringlas to kind of go on similar journeys in the future. So
thank you, Arindam.
Appreciate you, appreciate everything you've done for the country, and I hope to speak to you again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That was the episode for today. Absolutely love doing geopolitics specials on the show. Please send in your guest recommendations. Tell me what you thought of this episode, and do share this particular episode on all your WhatsApp groups. Share it with your friends. I feel there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions on the internet, but there's very few people whose opinions are worthy of being spread this wide. I'm hoping that this episode with Harshvardhan Shringla sir finds itself on most Indian WhatsApp groups. I know it's a very ambitious wish, but that's what I'm hoping to do through this show. I'm trying to put out the opinions of subject experts, of industry leaders, and of people who've held positions of power. It's their opinions that we should be listening to. So whether you're a listener who's under the age of 25 or over the age of 40, I hope you enjoyed this particular episode of TRS.